not so much a study is that this is a summary of my 35 years of experience in this business. So the primary findings, if you will, or summary, would be that we have discovered that remote sensing isn't as well used as it should be, because it is extremely useful for all elements of development, whether one's talking about a small village or whether one is looking at a region such as the Mekong Delta. Why this is so is in part because the technology is not as well explained by those of us involved in the technology, and in part because the people that can derive the benefits from the remote sensing technology tend not to understand the technology, and quite often they're somewhat afraid of the technology. And what I therefore am advocating is that there is more dialogue and explanation of the technology by those of us involved with the technology, so that we better understand what people involved in development assistance require, and so that the people in our field better understand what it is that the people involved in development assistance require. So it's about creating a better dialogue between the technology people like myself, and those in the development assistance world. And we found that there has been significant activity by the World Bank. They've had conferences on poverty alleviation that have focused on geospatial information, held in Washington every March. 2 conferences in a row have focused on geospatial information and the importance of land information in particular in alleviation of poverty. Well, part of the difficulty is that those of us involved in this field tend to be technology oriented. We do not tend to understand the vocabulary, the needs, the requirements of the development community. And I think we have to develop a better understanding in that respect. We also have to be able to better explain ourselves to senior policymakers, politicians, and senior bureaucrats, because those are the people who ultimately make the decision whether or not technology is used. And that's something that I particularly and my company has been doing, because I have experience as a scientist. I have experience in dealing with the media. I've been interviewed by every major media outlet in Canada. I understand how to communicate to politicians, and we have to get more people who can do that. And when we do, we will end up better off. In Canada, we're very fortunate because our new Prime Minister Trudeau, has a very clear understanding of the value of these technologies, because he actually has studied this in his academic work. And that makes it really exciting for us in Canada, because the previous government didn't quite understand the technology and were in fact in some respects anti-science. So from our point of view in Canada, we're very fortunate. What we want to do is create that same kind of fortunate situation elsewhere in the world. It's a little bit too early to tell all the details with respect to geospatial information, but certainly the early indications are that there will be more of a focus on science, good science, and making decisions based on science and scientific information. And of course, part of that scientific information is the geospatial information that we are all involved in collecting and using. And in Asia, I think that one can say that there are a number of examples of very strong use of the technology and an interest at senior political levels. In India, for example, the person in charge of the space program is a deputy minister. Not an assistant deputy minister, not a relatively junior person, but senior in government. That says a great deal about the importance of the technology in that country. Well, I think it's obvious that in the coming years, issues such as climate change, the tremendous population in Asia who live very close to sea level, that has tremendous implications for the use of geospatial information for environmental monitoring, change monitoring, and there are all kinds of papers being produced or being given at this conference that outline the importance of things like, well, right now there's a session going on coastal change. These are the things that I think we will be asked to address in the future. Climate change, coastal change, sea level rise, these are all important issues. I think you've said it quite nicely when you said more hand in glove. We have a lot of data. Part of the difficulty, particularly in development assistance, is that the data do tend to cost more than people are willing to spend. And that's why I put such an emphasis on ensuring that senior political people and senior bureaucrats are accepting of the technology. We have a lot of data. It's not always the best data. It's not always the most useful data, but we do have a lot of data. The important thing is to understand what data we can use for what purpose. And sometimes that is not well understood. And quite frankly, the people who sell data often will, if you sell hammers, everything looks like a nail. And I think that's the problem we have to a certain extent with remote sensing. If the company is selling radar data, then radar data can solve all problems. If they're selling some kind of other data, then they'll say the same thing. Easy access to data and clear policies that say who can access what data and when are critically important, because of course in many years ago people regarded topographic maps as being secret, and aerial photographs in Canada, aerial photographs after the World War II were stamped secret. Well, if they're secret, people can't use them. So we advocate clear and open access to data. That doesn't necessarily mean free. What that means is clear and open access. And of course, certainly for certain countries will have certain areas along a certain border or a certain military activity or military base. They don't want that imagery distributed. Well, that's fine, because each country has to protect its sovereignty, its security. So obviously there are going to be some cases where you don't want data being widely available. But otherwise, it's critically important, because if you don't have open access to data, you're going to have less information. In Canada, we got into this business of remote sensing because we wanted to know more about our natural resources than the Americans who were launching satellites and monitoring us. And we justified RadarSat, which is a $1.5 billion program, justified that on the basis of our sovereignty in the north, ice monitoring, and our resources. Simply put, we want to know more about our country than other people do. And that should be the goal, in my opinion, of every country involved in remote sensing in the world today.